So Bernie Sanders made a little distinction here between himself and Elizabeth Warren. There's a reason why he's doing it. The polls show recently that Elizabeth Warren has indeed surged. She actually has knocked off Biden for leading the Real Clear Politics average of national polls. So it shows that something's happening here. There is movement. Biden's going down. She's going up. Bernie's kind of flatlined. Recently, he's dropped a little bit. Now, that's not the end of the world because, again, we're still a long ways off. So there's a lot that can change between now and then. If you remember, Kamala Harris had her moment in the sun where everybody thought, oh my goodness, she's going to be the nominee. And then she fell off a cliff after Tulsi introduced her to the underside of a bus. So it ain't over, man. But Elizabeth Warren at this point in time is surging. Now, thankfully, in some of the early states, Bernie is still doing very well. I saw a poll yesterday, for example, that basically had all three of them tied in Iowa. I'm not sure what the average is for Iowa and New Hampshire, but I know that, at least in some of the recent polls, Bernie's tied. So it's not necessarily panic time yet, but it is time to make a distinction. I understand they had a ceasefire. I understand they have a ceasefire. I understand that in any Elizabeth Warren administration, Bernie Sanders gets a cabinet position. I understand that in any, Bernie Sanders presidency, Elizabeth Warren gets a cabinet position. I understand that they're friends. I get all of that. But you are running in a Democratic primary. And especially with her surging, you do need to draw distinctions. You can't just present this as like, oh, we're all really good candidates and, it's just gentlemen's disagreements that we have. And, you pick the flavor, you pick the variety. No, you have to show if you're Bernie Sanders that you're, uniquely suited to this job. And he hasn't done that to this point. So now he's going to begin to make the case. Let's see the first shot across the bow.
So let me ask you, you and Elizabeth Warren have pretty close to identical positions on the big issues. What do you say to those who say they would pick her because she's 8 years younger than you, she didn't just come through this, didn't just have a heart attack, and look, in the positions, you're pretty much the same?
Well, look, every American is going to make his or her own choice about the candidate that they want. And Elizabeth Warren has been a friend of mine for some 25 years. And I think she is a very, very good senator. But there are differences between Elizabeth and myself. Elizabeth, I think, as you know, has said that she is a capitalist through her bones. I'm not. I think the situation today that we face in this country of the greed and the corruption that is existing in Washington, that is existing at the corporate elite level, where you have massive amounts of price fixing going on in the drug companies, where we're the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people, where we have right now, as we speak, in the fossil fuel industry, you got companies making billions of dollars a year in profit, doing what? Oh, by the way, they're destroying the planet, all right? And I think business as usual and doing it the old-fashioned way is not good enough. It's not regulation now. What we need is, in fact, I don't want to get people too nervous, we need a political revolution. I am, I believe, the only candidate who's going to say to the ruling class of this country, the corporate elite, enough with your greed and with your corruption. We need real change in this country.
So you don't think that's what Elizabeth Warren is
saying?
Well,
look, Elizabeth is a friend of mine. She will speak for herself. I've just told you what I view.
But you have said there are differences, and you just mentioned a label.
Well, it's not a label. I mean, Elizabeth considers herself, if I got the quote correctly, to be a capitalist to her bones. I don't. And the reason I am not is because I will not tolerate for 1 second the kind of greed and corruption and income and wealth inequality and so much suffering that is going on in this country today, which is unnecessary.
She's built her campaign about having a plan for everything, but she hasn't put out a health care plan yet.
Again, Elizabeth is a friend of mine. Talk to her. I have put out a health care plan. It's called Medicare for All. We're going to tell the insurance companies and the drug companies that we will not continue this current dysfunctional and cruel system.
Okay, so it's very good that he's now making a distinction between himself and Elizabeth Warren. Because again, that needs to be done. That's the positive. The negative is I don't like this particular line of argument. Now, I understand people in my Twitter feed, I'm in lefty Twitter world, and everybody's loving what he's saying there. But my message to them is you got to stop dating yourself. Because we're trying to take this message and win an election. And so we can't just be in our little, cool, edgy subgroup here. We have to try to expand beyond the people that we already agree with. So when Bernie says, hey, she's a capitalist to her bones, I'm not, 65% of Americans still favor capitalism. That is not the argument I would use. Also, beyond that, labels are irrelevant, man. People don't know about labels, don't care about labels. What that entails is not perfectly clear to everybody. It's too cerebral. It's too much of a layer removed from the actual conversation. So I would not go with this line of attack anymore. I think that as Elizabeth Warren listened to this, she maybe cracked a smile. I don't think it was a particularly visceral attack that gets to the heart of the disagreements. And by the way, that's my theory of change, and that's my theory of how to argue, is you got to go with a visceral attack that cuts right through and is crystal clear and hits on some primitive base level. So, for example, what are some of the things Bernie can say? Well, Elizabeth Warren voted for Trump's military budget. You don't defeat Trump by handing him a blank check to do illegal wars. That cuts through. It's not cerebral. It's not up in the air. It's not label humping. It's she agrees with Trump. All you Democratic voters, hate Trump. She signed off on Trump's illegal and offensive wars. Gave him more money than he even wanted for the military. You can't say he's some lunatic, thin-skinned buffoon who shouldn't be anywhere near the red button and then say, let's give him a larger, more powerful military. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. Also, foreign policy is the area where the President of the United States has the most direct sway because you're the commander-in-chief. She's out to lunch on foreign policy. She's got nothing. She's not for real change on foreign policy. That's how you hit her. Why do you agree with Trump on the military? Why did you give him a blank check to do illegal and offensive wars? That's not very progressive. This is how you... Okay, let me give you another one. Again, it's got to be... And this is something that drives me crazy, is people on the left need to learn how to get your goddamn point out, too. There's another thing. This isn't necessarily a problem with Bernie. I've seen it more in other areas on the left. Get your point out. Stop beating around the bush. Get your point out. So you need to be able to fit it. And this is what Trump was so good at, is that he was able to just fit whatever his attack was in a little quick soundbite. And that lands. That gets into people's heads. I know you like listening to the sound of your own voice, but people are not necessarily going to be following along. They'll get lost real quickly. So, here's another one. I want to eliminate all student loan debt. She doesn't. Policy-based, but cuts right through. I want to eliminate all medical debt. She doesn't. She needs to explain to you why it's okay that 500,000 Americans go bankrupt because they don't have access. 500,000 Americans go bankrupt because of medical bills. Stuff like this cuts right through. Another one. I never had to take a pledge to stop taking big money because I never took big money. She just took a pledge to stop taking big money. But she transferred big money from her Senate campaign into her presidential campaign. Now, I've seen people obfuscate on this point recently where they're like, yeah, but Bernie transferred money too. Bernie transferred money that wasn't big money. There's a giant difference. Like, that's the whole crux of the disagreement, is that she went around all these wealthy liberal elite circles and raised big money and then transferred that money into the general election. There's a giant difference between that and transferring money that you raised from mailmen. Like, giant difference. So you could hit her on that. I didn't need to take a pledge to stop raising big money because I never took big money. She came out and decided, Tuesday, that big money is wrong. I didn't need to evolve. I'm already there. I mean, again, this is how you attack. Okay, you want one more argument? I'll give you one more argument here. And this one, I'll grant you, is not as hard-hitting as the others because it requires a little more explanation. The others are super to the point, super quick, and cuts right through and says, here's the difference. But if I was Bernie, I would say this. Elizabeth Warren praised the most conservative Democrat in the Senate, Joe Manchin, and said, let me make a spirited defense of Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is going to block every reform that would fix this country. Medicare for all, free college, a living wage, so on and so forth. We need to defeat Joe Manchin, not snuggle up with him, because we're going to get no change if Joe Manchin doesn't do the right thing. So Elizabeth Warren, in her heart of hearts, is an incrementalist. I am not. I am for big change, and I'm for it today. Again, that one's a little too wordy. You got to shave it down a little bit, perhaps. And people, granted, don't know who Joe Manchin is, so you're going to have to lay it out a little bit more. But bottom line is, I think these are the attacks that cut through more. I think that she agrees with Trump on the military. She's giving him more money for illegal offensive wars. Blank check. Blank check. She gave him a blank check for that stuff. That cuts through. Student loan debt, medical debt, that cuts through. Transferring big donor money, that cuts through. And I don't think that this is the right way to go about it. You don't say, oh, she's a capitalist to her bones. I'm not. Well, I'm sure she's devastated at the fact that you just handed over 65% of the country to her. I get it. In lefty Twitter world, they go, yes, Bernie got her. But again, 65% of the country is not anti-capitalist. So you don't lean into your opponent's strength. You don't do that. That's not how you argue. So it's good he's making the distinction. He needs to sharpen it. And he needs to be direct. And I don't know if he's going to do that. Bernie Sanders is genuinely a nice person. He genuinely does not want to confront, especially his friends. I mean, he really likes Elizabeth Warren, and she really likes him. So he's going to be hesitant to make these direct attacks. But that's the only way he wins. The only way he wins is if he does that. That's how you do it. I mean, again, to bring up the example of Trump, he ran against the entire Republican Party. And he painted them all as corrupt, status quo, business as usual people. There's no way Bernie's going to manage to topple the entire Democratic establishment without doing the same. It's just not going to happen. You can't paint it as like, oh, there's different flavors and varieties of Democrat up here, and you could pick which one you like. No, you have to be like, no, I'm the only option if you really want to get change. The only one. The only one. And you have to be crystal clear, to the point, and quick with that. And you need airtight arguments that she cannot BS her way out of. You want any argument against her, you want to be able to fit it into a quick little soundbite, and you want her to have to talk for 3 minutes to try to wiggle her way out of it. Because that's how you'll know you won. Because she's going to be lost in her own world trying to rationalize something, and you just hit her 1, 2, 3 real quick. Like you agree with Trump on the military budget, why are you giving him a blank check for offensive wars? The most draconian, barbaric aspect of his policy, and you agree with it. You agree with it. And then she'll buy, there was money that was important, that was part of that was in the, with body armor for the troops. That's the exchange you win. Now, I don't know if he'll do it, because these are sharp criticisms. It's a sharp criticism to say, oh, great, you agree with Trump on his worst aspects. That's a sharp criticism. That's a very sharp criticism, but it's true. So anyway, it's good he's making the distinction. He has to do it more going forward. But you got to come correct, man. You do. Because you're flatlining, she's ascending, and what she's successfully managing to do, very successfully managing to do, is she's getting many of the old Clinton supporters, Hillary Clinton supporters, they're somehow accepting of her, which, by the way, makes no sense, and it shows you that the Clinton people are not ideological. They're not. Many of them are very identity politics driven, and they want the the first female president, and they're willing to go on board with somebody who massively disagrees ideologically with Hillary Clinton. But she's getting them, and then also she is managing to chip away and get enough genuine lefty support where she's building a strong coalition here. So we know Bernie's never going to get those, most of those Hillary people on his side. So what you have to do is show that you're the real transformational candidate. You're the real one running on change, and make it incredibly digestible and simple how strong those disagreements are, how deep the divide really is. Because I don't think this is the kind of argument that, is a nail in the coffin for her. In fact, I think when she heard this, she smiled a little bit and said, "Oh, wow, you got me." Oh, I'm 65% of the country's with me. Wow. So it's funny because if you really look at if you go issue for issue with the polls and you compare Bernie to Elizabeth Warren, on virtually every issue where they disagree, Bernie's got the more popular position. But he led with an argument where she has the majority support. Keep making the distinction, get sharper, get quicker, get more specific, and get serious, because that's what's needed.